Okay, it is good to see my friend again. Hello, Elle.
Hello.
Hello. How
How
have you
are
been
you?
today?
I'm
Fantastic. It's lovely to see you again. It's been a while. Last time I saw you, I was in Connecticut. We got to go on a nice
yeah.
hike together. A lot has happened since then, but what's been going
Yes.
on?
Oh man. Like since we went on the hike in Connecticut?
And that hike itself was pretty interesting too. We had a stranger approach us very, I wouldn't say aggressively, but very they were like very confrontational, I think.
Yeah, it's just the most bizarre way. And I think you had like on some shirt that he had questions on, and he was just very uh nosy, maybe.
Hmm.
It was very odd, and like the vibe was very odd, and I was just like,
Yeah, isn't
I
it
don't
funny how
know.
people's body language really put out a particular vibe? Like it was almost like it felt like he was cornering us and was like, "All right, I'm gonna
Yeah.
hold you guys hostage for this conversation for X amount
Yes,
of time." Yeah.
it very much did. And I was like, if I had been there by myself, like I honestly don't know what I would have done. To be very thankful, I was very glad that you were there. From a male perspective, call me old fashioned, whatever. Like the only thing I had in me was my pocket knife, and I'm like, oh, I don't know how much good
Well,
this is gonna
I'm
do, but
flattered. Yeah, yeah. I didn't have anything with me, so you would have been my backup for sure. But no, yeah, that was peculiar. I
that
also
was.
remember, just that was a funny day. It was cool to meet you in person. That was our, like our first time hanging out, and it was nice because it was kind of like we were saying goodbye to each other. I was about to move out to Texas right after that, and
Yeah, like 3 days later or
a couple
something.
days later, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was cool. And I appreciate this very peculiar. Maybe I've already used that word too many times now, but like this community that we're a part of, which is more like a family now. I think, given the fact that we've all had great in-depth conversations with each other and we're supporting the idea that the truth is out there if we look hard enough, and it's fun to chat about. And so I appreciate you coming back on to the Local Listens podcast, Elle. And for
Yeah.
people who maybe never saw our episodes together, we've got two of them, one on my show, one on your show. Tell us about your show and, fill people in if they were unfamiliar with you.
Yeah, so you were actually my first guest interview on my podcast, Speed Bumps, your episode number 2. And in the first episode, I share my story of speed bumps, and people are really familiar with speed bumps in a road context, right? You go over them, you kind of have to slow down the big things in the road. But I feel like that's what we go through in life too. They're not walls or things like that. They're just speed bumps. They kind of force you to slow down. And a speed bump can be getting a new job, moving to a new state, getting married, getting divorced, a trauma, like starting a new job, like getting a cat. Like all of these are speed bumps, right? Some are big, some are little. Yeah, that little cutie right there. Um, like every, we all have speed bumps. And so I love having guests on to chat about their speed bumps, whatever, and it's whatever they choose. I don't tell people what they have to talk about. You completely are in charge of that. And I just want to chat with people in the hopes that maybe something that you went through, someone to listen to, and they either A, won't feel so alone, or B, can learn some life lessons so they don't maybe go through the same thing.
I love it. I love it. And as a former guest, and I would love to come back on sometime if you want to do that, like a speed
You'd be
bumps
my
round
first
two.
repeat.
Yeah,
You'd be
yeah.
my first repeat.
Cool, cool. Because there's so many other speed bumps we could talk
Yeah.
about, but no, I want to say you do an excellent job because it's just like you said. You lay out the foundation and then the guests will fill it in. And I also love how you start. And I maybe we already talked about this. Did someone ask you, or anyone ask you recently on a podcast, like, what are your favorite things about yourself, El? Have we already discussed this?
So the first person to ask me was, oh, I'm so bad with names, and I can picture her, and I met her in person. Taylor Elena.
Mhm.
She was the first person to ask me, and I was like waiting for that day because I was like, someone's gonna ask
Someone's
me
going
one
to,
day,
yeah.
and it was her, and it doesn't surprise me because she's also like into mentoring and coaching and things like that. So of course she would be the person, and yeah, because the first question and the only scripted question I ask everyone on my show is to please tell me 2 things you love about yourself,
Mm.
because it's so easy for us to answer that question about our partner or our kids or someone that we care about. But when it comes to ourselves, people are like, you want me to do what? I have to say something I like about me. Like, and it's really hard for some people. Um, but yeah, that's
So
the
I love that. And it's such a cool way to start because that question in and of itself is fostering the perfect kind of mindset, really.
yeah,
If we're gonna go through our speed bumps and talk about them, then let's start with a little self-love first. Let's
yeah,
give ourselves a pat on the back. So
yeah,
when we think about the answer to that question, on a day-to-day basis, we could answer it in so many different ways. If you asked me yesterday what my favorite things were about myself, I wouldn't have the same answer today.
right.
I'm going through different things. I have different, problems and trials, but let's put the pin on like you exiting a career that was a very big deal, and
Mhm.
your exit was also a big deal from a viral standpoint. And I know we've spoken about this, but maybe you should let people know if they're not familiar. What was it that you were doing in a particular very powerful industry, and then how have you transitioned? And maybe we can start with what have you done, and then I really love to ask you how you've grown out of that role into this new maybe persona that you've built.
Yeah, so I always loved science as a kid, and with all my surgeries and stuff, really interested, but I never wanted to be a doctor, but I loved science. And so I was like, I want to work in the lab. And then I was fascinated by infectious diseases. And so I got my bachelor's in cellular and molecular biology and my master's in infectious diseases and microbiology. And my lifelong dream was to work for the CDC in Atlanta and wear the crazy spacesuits and like go to Africa for an Ebola outbreak. That was my lifelong dream. Um, and I got pretty close to doing that. Uh, I didn't move to Atlanta or anything, but I did work in a high security lab, wore the crazy spacesuit, got to work with some really cool stuff. Ended up, graduating with my master's, some speed bumps in there, then working for a pharmaceutical company. Then the world went crazy. And because that pharmaceutical company was in a different state, I switched jobs to a different pharma company. And because the world was weird, a lot of people were asking different questions that I hadn't thought to ask. And just before the world went weird, I had gotten this really weird bronchitis, upper respiratory thing.
Hmm.
And doctors had no idea what it was. They had me on inhalers and steroid treatments and steroids and antibiotics and the works. Nothing was helping. And my now husband goes, "Can I just put some essential oils in a diffuser?" And I'm like, at this point, I like couldn't talk more than 3 words without going to a coughing fit. And I was like, sure. Wasn't sleeping, was couldn't eat, couldn't swallow. It was awful. And I slept that night for the first time in like a month. And I was like, all right, I'll eat some humble pie. Western medicine couldn't help me. But these oils in this little diffuser did. Like, what's up with that? So that kind of led me on my journey. And I started, is this going on YouTube?
Well, it might,
I'll
but
use code words. It's
I don't
okay.
mind getting kicked off of YouTube,
I'll use code words. So that folded up piece of paper that's in with every medication is
Mm,
called an insert.
right.
And I'd come across an Instagram account called Just the Inserts and started reading them about pokey-pokes and other pharmaceutical medications and the potential side effects. And I was flabbergasted because in school, what I went to school for, I actually part of my master's was developing a pokey poke for potential really bad things like anthrax. It
Mm,
wasn't anthrax, but like it, okay, in that same category. And so I thought they were all good. I thought anyone who didn't agree with 3-letter agencies was crazy. Um, and all that's what all my friends believed. That's what I knew. I thought all my family believed, like all of these things. Um, and because of all the surgeries I'd went through, why would I question Western medicine? It saved my life. This account presented information to me in a very non-judgmental way, in a non-biased way. And it was kind of like, hey, did you know? Hey, did you ever consider this? And I realized I wasn't educated, I was indoctrinated. And I had never really asked questions. I had taken what I was told about pokey pokes and assumed that they were right. And I never questioned anything, never researched, just took everything that I was told as gospel. And when I left pharma, I swore off all pokey pokes. For the most part, swore off Western medicine, unless, obviously emergencies and things like that. And the pharmaceutical company that I left was making in-home tests for when the world went weird. And they were doing some crazy things. And when I would bring it up, the answers would be like, oh, don't worry about it. The owner knows the governor. We don't need to worry about breaking federal laws. Don't worry about that.
A little sketchy.
And I finally got to a point I was like, I can't do this. Like, they were paying me a shit ton of money. And I was even like, I told my now husband, I was coming home crying. I was so stressed. I was like, I can't morally do this. For so many reasons, I can't morally do this. So I quit. Left basically a 6-figure income on the table and walked away. And that was really hard because not only was my worldview turned upside down, I had $200,000 in 7 years of school that I thought that was right. That was my community. That was the people that I knew. And I lost all of that. And having your world flipped upside down like that with everything that you thought you knew was right is mind-boggling.
Your entire paradigm had flipped upside down.
Your entire paradigm is shifted. And then you start to question everything. Mm-hmm. Because this is what I went to school for, and I was so sure I was right about this, but I turned out to be wrong. What else can I be wrong about? And I've gone out and I made a couple posts on Instagram, basically apologizing for what I used to do, because I thought I called people crazy. I called people conspiracy theorists. And I'm ashamed of it, and I'm sorry for it. And I should have known better, and I didn't, and now I do. And eating that humble pie doesn't taste great, but staying silent and being unwilling to change my mind when presented with new information, like I can't imagine doing that.
Yeah, and I truly believe that your voice is your ultimate gift. And now that you're in this position, you've done 44 podcast episodes, and I know you're focusing on your guests, but just the fact that you've willingly placed yourself in the spotlight, like we all eat humble pie in public every now and then. But, what I really want to get at is the fact that in the beginning, you had joined the pharmaceutical industry to help people. You were,
Yep.
A part of these programs that you truly believed were going to help people. And I think that's beautiful. And it's, that's what's so tragic too, is because the way that people are led into something, believing that they would really sincerely do good for the entire world, when in fact, maybe the bottom line, the financial gain was actually like the main target. So I really respect you for opening up about that. And, you're putting yourself in a very vulnerable spot to even, discuss what you've been through in these companies. And so I think you've been helping a lot of people just by sharing your experience with the paradigm shift, because cognitive dissonance is so scary. And I think once you've figured out that the data that you really, or the science that you really trusted in the beginning, wasn't as trusting as you thought it could be. It's
science
amazing.
with a dollar sign. It's not science with an S, it's science with a dollar sign. And shortly after I completely quit pharma, I was approached by a recruiter to actually move to Virginia and work for USAMRIID, which is the United States Army Medical Research Institute for Infectious Diseases, which was like right up there with working in Atlanta for the CDC. Like, I would have been totally happy with that dream job as well. And at that time, they were requiring devices over your face,
Mm.
and they were starting to require pokey pokes.
They still are, by the
And
way. A lot of companies are, as I've been applying to jobs. Yeah.
yep,
Yep.
yep, that hasn't gone away. And so this recruiter reached out to me and via LinkedIn, and I showed my now husband, and he's like, "Why don't you just take the call?" He's like, "This was literally your dream." He's
Mm.
like, "You're if you don't at least take the call, you're going to regret this." Like, he's like, "Print the email." He's like, "This was your job." He's like, "You have it." He goes, "Now, if you choose not to because your opinions and beliefs have changed," he goes, "that's totally fine." He goes, "But at least take the phone call and see what they have to say." I
Mm.
was like, "Okay, that's a fair, like, I can do a phone call." So I do a phone call, and they're asking me about relocations and this stuff, and it lasts maybe 10-15 minutes. And no mention of salary or anything.
Mm.
And I go, "Well, are pokey pokes required? Are Jabberwockies required?" "Well, yeah." I was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not interested. Thank you. I don't disclose any of that information." I didn't say I was against them, didn't say they were, I just
Mm.
said, "I don't disclose my personal medical information." And they're like, "What?" I was like, "No, thank you. Like, I don't disclose my personal medical information for any reason except to my doctor." Um, and they were flabbergasted, and they're like, "Okay," and kind of hung up.
Mm.
A couple weeks later, she calls back to see if I still had the same stance. Over about 2 months, there's three of these phone calls and messages and things like that. And each time the phone calls get shorter because I just go, "Are you still requiring it?" "Yes." "Okay, then I don't want to talk to you." And my husband, I was telling this to my husband and a friend, and they're like, "Do you realize what you did?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Like, what did I do?" Like, they're like, "You basically just told the government you can't be bought. You didn't ask about salary. You had your dream position, and you just went, 'No, you're violating my beliefs and my morality. I don't care how much you offer.' You didn't even give the opportunity for the government to try and buy you." And I was like, "Huh." And they're like, "You still don't get it." And I was like, "Apparently not." Like, and I still, like, I'm not, this was a while ago. It's like a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now.
Mm.
I still don't grasp the, I guess, how people can be bought. Like, and maybe that I'm just naive like that, right? Because I personally, I guess, wouldn't do it. But they're like, "Do you realize you're in the minority?" And my husband's like trying to get this through my skull. And I'm like, "Okay, like," he's like, "They could have offered to pay off your student loan debt. They could offer this. He's like, "They could have offered anything, right?" I was like, "Yeah, but it's not worth it." And he literally like slaps his hand on his forehead. He's like, "Do you realize that you are like a very small minority right now?" And I was like, "Okay, like, I'm still not doing it." And he's like, "We're so on some lists." And I was like, "Yeah, probably."
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
probably.
Well, it's amazing that you were just doing what came naturally to you, given the experiences and the data that you've looked at, and I appreciate you staying firm like that. I think that's what people need to be doing, despite what they might be sacrificing. And I think there's more to gain by taking your stance and being true to yourself for the most. Like whatever financial offer you might receive, it'll never um exceed or supersede that personal morality that kind of forced you or drove you to quit in the first place.
Yeah.
So always going to respect that, and that's why I'm happy to be your friend, because we share such similar values there. And I wanted to ask you, from looking back on the trajectory and where you've kind of landed from that point. I'm sure there have been struggles and speed bumps, but when you look back on the whole journey, and from the point when you finally quit, and then you got this other offer and you said no repeatedly, um, how do you feel like you've continued to grow and develop? Because from that point, you really did, just like as your husband was saying, like you really put a definitive point on your life path. And like I said earlier, I totally respect that, and I wish I had done something similar after complying so much with like weekly tests and mask mandates and all this. So in general, this is very much like a long-winded way of me asking you, like, what makes you proud of yourself since that point? How you've continued. It's almost like you've given yourself an opportunity to work outside of the system in a way.
Yeah, I guess I'm proud of myself for finally finding my voice.
Hmm.
Um, being born disabled without a thumb, limb different, like whatever term someone wants to use. I was very timid. I was very shy. Did never want to be the center of attention. Uh, anything like that. Like even my parents singing happy birthday to me and it's just us in our house, I would turn bright red, sink down into a chair. Like I hated being the center of attention.
Hmm.
And so for me to wait and be like, yep, this is what I did, I left. I'm very firm on my opinions and can back up in the inserts like why I'm against all Jabberwockies. um that I'm very proud of myself for continuing to do that.
Hmm.
And I guess I'm a very blunt person, but through this journey, I've also come to understand that we don't always have to agree on everything.
Right.
And I can respect your opinions as long as you respect mine, right? We
Mhm.
can be adults and have civil discourse. Um, and bringing up information in a way that I learned it on just the inserts,
Hmm.
in a way of kind of like, hey, did you know? Or if someone,
Just like how you were taught. Right.
just
Right.
how
It's
I
like,
was
yeah.
taught, that just how I was introduced to things. Like if
Yeah.
someone's complaining of a migraine and they're like, yeah, I'm on this med. And I just do a quick Google search and I'm like, oh, well, do you know that like that could possibly be a side effect of that? Like, have you talked to your doctor about
Hmm.
that? You know, or hey, you have headaches a lot. Like, have you tried peppermint oil or have like giving these little alternatives or these little seeds for thought and
Yes.
not being this, you know, hammer and,
Oh, it's
calling
crucial.
someone an
Yeah.
idiot, like
Yeah.
this very delicate way almost,
Hmm.
because when you realize that you're wrong, having that realization in front of someone, you can become very defensive because
Yes.
now you have all these thoughts going through your head. And I never want to put anyone on the defensive.
Yeah, and from a psychological standpoint, I've heard people describe that defensive reaction, or like, just to the extreme, like the paradigm shattering right in front of you, is the same thing as like going through a breakup, a divorce, because your paradigm is built on that other person, and
Yep.
they are no longer reliable in the way that you've seen them, or you no longer feel the same way that you do, and then so the whole paradigm shatters, and it leaves a very chaotic feeling in someone. So I appreciate that you're aware, and I hope that more people who share the maybe the unsavory views about pharmaceuticals in general will be able to discuss them in a healthy way. It's ironic to use that word healthy, but I think it's a good point to address. And for the podcast that you've created, I know that's also a big deal because if people listen to your first episode, that's where you really lay out your life path, and
Mm-hmm.
in a way that is very inspiring. And I felt like when you were speaking earlier about um, finding your voice, I felt like I was noticing you feeling empowered. That's one way to describe it, right?
Yeah.
Like you're
Yeah.
empowering yourself, and now you're empowering others as well. And so, would you like to share a bit? You've got 44 episodes now, which is really cool. I love that number. What's been going on, with your guests? Is there anything you want to share, like things that have stood out to you in particular? Because you've interviewed a lot of people at this point. You've been doing it for almost a year, and I love to talk to other podcasters because we are always consuming really cool stories and getting to learn really unique things that you wouldn't find anywhere else. So, what would you want to begin with as far as, discussing your past guests that you've spoken to?
So I have on podcasters. I also have people who've never been on a podcast and have
Mm,
no desire to be on one again. I have had a couple people who'll be like, I'm only coming on yours and I'm never going on anyone else's.
mm.
Um, and I've covered a wide variety of topics. So whether or not I agree with you is irrelevant. This isn't, I'm not going to debate you. I may ask questions to try and understand your point of view, but I'm not going to disagree with you. Um, I had a mother and a daughter who came on. The daughter got the newest Jabberwocky and ended up having a lot of issues with that.
Like with
But she,
a booster and everything like that.
I think it was the initial or the second
Ah,
one
okay,
that
yeah,
she
yeah.
had issues with.
Mhm.
And she was one of the first groups to get it because she was
Oh,
like
okay,
in med school.
yeah.
Um, and but she still thinks that uh, other Jabberwockies, at least at the time of the interview, were okay. That wasn't my opportunity to sit there and preach to her. I was
Mhm.
like, okay, like I may have asked a couple questions to try and understand her thought process, but I wasn't there to change her mind.
Yeah, you weren't there to like attack her. You were there to
No,
hear her out. Yeah.
right. You know, I had Brandon Thomas on recently from Expanding
Love
Reality,
Brandon. Shout out, buddy.
and that was a great conversation because it wasn't, sometimes people come on and they talk about something bad that happened or um something. We started a homestead. I had Lanny come on and talk about, starting her homestead
Mm.
uh from Greener Pastures. And so people, I have all these different conversations, and one of the most common misconceptions that I get is either A, my story's not interesting enough, which that's not true, that's BS because everyone's story is interesting, or two, I didn't go through something as traumatic as you, so I shouldn't come on your show. Listen, I hope people don't go through shit as traumatic as I did, right?
Right, right.
But if you have and you want to share, come on. If you haven't, but you've gone through other speed bumps, also please come on. Like, or maybe you have, but you want to share a different speed bump. That's cool. Like, I just want us to all learn from each other.
Right. That goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's going to benefit them to tell
Yeah.
their story, and you make people feel comfortable in a very like natural way. So of course they'd be willing to share and open up. And then, there's obviously, I'm sure you are benefiting from all these stories. It's pretty cool. And then anyone listening, like you said,
Yeah.
they might relate, and that's beautiful. I mean, I couldn't like tell you how many people or who or what they've really learned or benefited, but I know, I mean, just the potential of that happening is making it like that's one of the most fun parts of doing this, I guess you could say.
Oh, it is. And I never know sometimes what people are going to pop out with. So,
Hmm.
Rosie, the co host of Upstate Unconventional, I had her on because of she had talked about interest. She felt like she was from the Fae or the fairy folk,
Mm.
and she had recently at that point become the co-host on Upstate Unconventional with her husband, and so I had asked her on because of that. She decided on her own to share something I was completely unaware of. So if you go and listen to that episode, my reactions are completely genuine. I had no idea.
Mm.
And she later told me, she's like, I wanted to, but I wasn't sure, but you made me so comfortable. Like I really wanted to get it out there. And for her, she said it felt like um, a burden was being lifted because it
Yes,
was no longer just hers. It was
very
out there.
therapeutic.
It was something she didn't have to be ashamed of or worry about anymore. And so for some people, they see it as very therapeutic. Like that's cool too. I've cried on my show. I've laughed on my show, like everything.
Oh, let
And
me say this too. When I was driving to Texas, I got myself a really good laugh from you and Kaylee Burkana. Like the two of
yes,
you giggling back and forth. That was one of my favorite episodes. Just put a big smile on my face. I just wanted to interject with that really quick. Shout out Kaylee.
yes, Kaylee is awesome. And she does natal chart readings.
Mhm.
She's only on Telegram, from my understanding. Um, but yeah, if you want your natal chart read,
Telegram and YouTube.
yeah, Telegram, YouTube. She does like Monday night tarot and giggle tarot and things like that. Uh, I first heard her on your podcast, and her laugh, like I sounded like I felt like a complete idiot because I messaged her and I was just like, I'm gonna sound like an idiot, but your giggle and your laugh throughout Jake's episode just made me smile, and I wanted you to know that.
I'm glad I'm not the
Like,
only one. Yeah.
like I just had to tell you that.
Yeah.
And we ended up having this conversation back and forth. My husband doesn't listen, it's fine. Our anniversary is coming up, and I actually ordered a joint natal chart reading for our anniversary
Oh,
present.
that's badass. What a cool gift. Yeah. That'll be really nice. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Kaylee's great. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate that because, we all have these wonderful gifts to share with each other. And so that's what makes this community awesome. It's not just for like people who do their own podcast, but I mean, you get involved with this group, and
Yep.
I've never really experienced that before. Besides, like, I used to be a part of this like Terrence McKenna group on Facebook, just like
Mm-hmm.
going through all the lectures, and you see these memes and you talk to people who are like, whoa, the crazy psychedelic ideas. This is fun to talk about. And I got to meet someone who was in that group, but like this community, I'm loving the fact that people are always collaborating. That's instantly when I saw you and Brandon Thomas do an episode together, I was like, yes, I mean these combinations of people, it's lovely to see everyone just building each other up. I always go back to rising tides raise all ships, and that's really fun. And you know, sometimes when I do podcast, L, I really like plan out a lot of stuff. But there's something about this episode, people listening right now. I want to fill everyone in on some context. So last night I was standing outside and I was like, oh, cool. I'm gonna speak with Ellie again. It's gonna be fun. And then like spontaneously, and this happens sometimes, you just
Yep.
get ideas like boom, boom, boom. And it wasn't like a clearly logical and rational idea. It was just like doorway to the divine, doorway to the divine, doorway to the divine. I'm like, what is this? Like, what is the doorway to the divine? It keeps coming up, keep
Yeah.
thinking about it. And I I was so wrapped up in it that I had to text you this morning. I was like, hey L, we're gonna do a podcast today, and I just keep having this repetitive thought about the doorway to the divine. I feel like I should ask you about that. Does that mean anything to you? So let's start with that because very random, divine timing. It's like a thought of divine revelation, I guess. But when I say the word doorway to the divine, what had come up for you? I'm very curious to learn more about this.
So first of all, you were channeling. That's what that is. Um, so for me, when I got the text at 7 a.m., I had something that popped into my head, but I was like, I can't send this text at 7 a.m. I haven't even had coffee yet. And honestly, it was a birth canal. Like, that's what initially went through my head. I was like, but I don't know how to text this to Drake at 7 a.m.
Wait
Like,
a few hours, yeah.
we're just going to wait until I'm talking to him. But then you sent these gifts, and they were like doors being opened, like just the series of doors, like
Yeah.
almost like Russian dolls.
Yep. One was like an infinite zoom. It's like you open a door and it zooms into
Yeah.
another and another. Yeah, like Russian dolls for sure.
So I don't even know now. Maybe 4 months ago, I had this dream, and I was talking with Whitney and Leemond, Whitney Fox and Leemond.
Two wonderful
And
people.
yes, and I forget why exactly or how exactly those two people ended up brought into this. But I was describing this dream of, I remember being on like a landing with stairs, but the stairs were very not your typical 3D, and almost like Harry Potter-esque, or like they could move, and they were not tilted the right way, and like angles, and um I forget exactly the whole dream now, but that was the first one. And so I was describing this in more detail at the time to Leemond. I mean, I don't know if Leemond was there, but it was at least my husband, Mike, and Whitney. And they're like, you mean like Salvatore Dali? And I'm like, I don't know who that is. Like, who's that?
Oh, I know exactly
And
what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
Mike pulls up this picture,
Right.
or he like Googles it, and he's showing me stuff on his phone. And I stop him and I was like, that was my dream.
Yeah, yeah.
I've never seen these pictures, didn't know who this guy was before. And then later on, I end up having this dream of almost like a labyrinth, but with locked doors. So, like the outer ring, okay, um, was kind of like the slums of like a third world country.
Right.
And in the middle, it actually in both dreams was the last pharmaceutical company that I worked at.
So the elites are right in the center. Yeah.
Yes. And I don't remember why I was trying to get to it in the wonky stair dream, but in this labyrinth dream, um, the walls looked solid, but if you knew like where to press, like something would like pop out, and
That is
then
very
it
Harry Potter-esque.
right, and then it would open,
Mhm.
and then it would close, and there was stuff like obstacles in there, like someone trying to kill you with a gun, or
Mm.
like all this crazy stuff. And in both dreams there was this black cat, and I've never owned a black cat. My cat is not currently black, she's a calico. And I kept having to get through these different layers, but it wasn't just like a rectangle layer. It was like a labyrinth to get to the next layer, to get into the next layer. And um, I knew that the staircase, once I got there, would be another like Salvatore Dali type thing.
Mm.
And there was this period of maybe 4 months where I was having these dreams, um, where I'd wake up and I would just hit voice record on my phone because I wouldn't remember them later.
Gotta get them
But
down immediately.
I would get them down immediately, and I was realizing I was basically like channeling stuff from either about Whitney or Lehman, and it was making sense to them, or stuff that they had researched, and they'd be like, well, do you know about this or know about this? And I'm like, I don't know. They're like, well, that's so and so. And like, I love to research, but I haven't had as much time as I wanted. So
Mhm.
my form of research comes to listening to other people's podcasts, because I can drive or run errands or clean the house
Exactly.
or take care of the dog. Um, so even if I hear something cool on a podcast, I then don't go do a deep dive. It's really rare that
Mhm.
I go and do that.
But you were able to share this dream with Whitney and Lehman, and they were like pointing in all different directions, like, look at this,
Yeah.
look at that.
Yeah. Like, don't you know about this? Haven't you heard of this person? Like, what about this person? I'm like, I don't know anything that you're talking about. And from my understanding, I never heard of it in a podcast or anything, but I was like, I knew this stuff,
Mhm.
or I could see these things, but I didn't understand the context of them. It was
Yeah,
like I
you
was
had
the
some
middleman.
intuitive understanding, but the conceptual understanding was like to
Yeah.
come in the future.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I haven't had those dreams in a while. They've kind of tapered off. But yeah, it was weird. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I, I've never seen Salvatore Dali. Mike knew who he was. Whitney knew he was.
Mhm.
I guess Lehman lived like a couple miles from like an exhibit or a museum that had a bunch of his paintings. And I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, but that's what
But
my dream looked
they
like.
pulled it up and you're like, yeah, that's what I saw. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of interesting. Oh, there's a ton there. Okay, so this is gonna be very much like similar to what Carl Jung would speak about, the collective consciousness. And
Yeah.
the fact that, I mean, like, let's say you and Salvador Dali have something in common. I mean, don't we all have something in common? It's
Yeah.
this collective etheric field of consciousness around us, and you were able to tap into it and saw something. I mean, like, maybe you had seen that staircase before, just didn't know it was Salvador Dali, but who knows? That's not going to be important for now. But what is
Right.
important is the fact that, like, perhaps what you have in common is that you were both able to tap into something eternal and timeless, and something floating around in the Akashic that was like in this library that we can all access, and you were able to pull it out of your dream state. And the funny thing is that now that you've shared it and you've shared it out with other people, that continues this like cycle of creation. It's like you take an idea and you can keep it all to yourself, but it's truly like the artistic value is like when you put it out into some form in speech and imagery and whatever, a music, a poem, and then it begins to evolve and it's like you're giving birth to something. So it goes back to that womb symbolism that you spoke about earlier. You know, the doorway to the divine is literally whenever we can birth something out, and then the entire world has changed forever. So I'm curious, what kinds of things, because maybe I might want to do my own research, and I'll definitely put the Dali painting as the episode art. I think that'd be fitting. But what kinds of
Yeah.
things did they bring up in response to you telling them about this stream? Do you remember what they were saying?
Um, it wasn't necessarily anything significant to our lives or anything. It was just I was knowing stuff that I never researched.
Hmm.
I never looked into these people. Um, it was just like I knew stuff. And I was actually recently listening to your episode with Whitney Fox. And in it, you were describing a dream with a staircase.
Yes.
And I messaged Whitney because I've had this happen more than once now. And I didn't know who else to mention or like ask this to because I was like, I feel like I'm going nuts. So I've had this thing now where whether it's in-person conversations or a podcast or whatever, someone will start describing something as a memory.
Hmm.
And I can see it here before you finish saying it. Like
Oh
I'm
yeah.
there like viewing on a TV screen, right?
Precognition, I think is what they call that. Yeah.
And I was like how do I tell people that like I can see what they're seeing without sounding like a lunatic?
Hmm.
I was like, can you do that? She's like, no. And I was like, well, she's like, but it's okay. Like everyone has different gifts.
Right.
But I could see your dream, Jake. Like I could see the staircase. I could see the two women on the bed. Um, I could see that it was in black and white.
Hmm.
All of these things. And so what's interesting to me is, well, you said doorway to the divine. For me, that brought up my staircase dream and then also connected to your staircase dream.
I was thinking the same exact thing when you told that, because like, all right, when we bring up the doorway to the divine, I wasn't thinking about a staircase, but then you brought it up in your dream, and so I was like, oh, okay, well, this is interesting. So now, when uh when we think about when we absorb light into our eyes,
Yep.
there's like you take something in, and this is what I was taught in school,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like all of the images are reflected internally, so like we're seeing a mirror image of this world. And I also like to think about the fact that light, as we're taught, travels at a certain speed, and so like you could be receiving information from someone even regardless of time or distance. Like you could be listening to a podcast from 4 or 5 years ago, and still you would be able
Yeah.
to anticipate and visualize what they were talking about, because I think we're tapping into something really etheric here. So it's really cool that you brought that up. I never really got to think about that gift really, like, but that's, I think, a really solid foundation for building empathy, is when you
Mm-hmm.
can really visualize what someone is talking about, and then also being able to kind of experience it with them in real time, or in
Yeah.
that same kind of flow. So that's really interesting. I'm glad we got to talk about this, and I think there's more to come with that, because the dream, now that you brought it up again, that staircase dream is starting to remind me of the Wizard of Oz in a way, because like the beginning is in black, and it's not in color, so there's like a part two to that dream. I think it's like
Yeah.
eventually the world was colorized, and I had other dreams, lucid dreams, that were much more vivid, but in a different way. So anyways, i I think there's a lot to follow up there, and I would love to kind of dig into the symbolism on my own time. And I want to ask you, if we think back to this concept of empathy, and
Mhm.
also what we were speaking about earlier with science, and with gently planting seeds, I think those are all really brilliant concepts. Even though they might seem simple on the surface, it's like learning to communicate in a fruitful way,
Mhm.
not like a way that's gonna like tear things down, tear people
Yeah.
down. But when you think about yourself and the community around you, your family, your friends, we could all agree, maybe just like back in 9/11, there was a collective trauma that everyone had to go through together. And I feel like 2020 to 2021, especially, um, definitely parts of 2022 as well. But, like, let's just say like the pandemic, the quote
Yep.
unquote
Yep.
pandemic was our collective trauma. And now, how do you see, like, from your point of view, how have we responded to that? Obviously, like, there hasn't been a great response in some ways, but what are some of the other maybe positive responses that you've noticed, again, within yourself, your family, your friends, your community, etc.?
Um, a lot of people I've noticed are more open to alternative, Eastern, natural, holistic, whatever term, whatever label you want to stick on it, um, solutions. They're realizing maybe they couldn't get into the doctor right away because they had strep throat and they need an antibiotic. So what else could they use? Or maybe they were afraid to go into the doctor, or whatever the reason. Um, or when certain items were in short supply. Like, remember, we couldn't get bleach for a while. You couldn't get hand sanitizer,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So what are some other natural things that we can do? How do we support our body? Um, when things do go around, how do we become a little more self sufficient? I'm not talking completely go off the grid and do everything yourself, but how can you rely a little bit less on those um, quote unquote mainstream supply chains? So maybe that's getting to know your local farmer and buying eggs from them instead of going to the grocery store. Or it's learning to make your own cleaners instead of buying Lysol and Windex. Um, for some people, it's just little things like that. And also, it ends up saving money. For some people, and for me too, it became this complete overhaul of the products that I use and the things I put on my body and in my body. And while I thought I ate fairly healthy prior to when the world went weird, I've become even more health conscious, just really examining what's in our food and, you know, for women, what's in our makeup or our deodorant, our shampoos. And uh, a lot of that stuff is just, oh, it says it's safe. Oh, it's so and so says it works. And oh, those lawsuits, they don't mean anything. It's fine. We don't worry about that. And I became really health conscious and literally questioning everything, right? Going back to if I was really wrong about that, what else can I be wrong about?
You just reminded me of one of my favorite teachers. I had this social studies teacher named Mr. Chivinsky, and his nickname was Mr. Chiv. Funny thing about Mr. Chiv, he would give like a lecture, a monologue, whatever, and then at the very end, he'd be like, "Okay, class," any questions, concerns, trials, tribulations, things that you need more help with. He would repeat that same phrase over and over again, so it's stuck in my head. I should probably start asking people that when I'm done. But when we think about archetypally what we've been through, as you were speaking, I thought about like a divorce or like a death of a parent almost. Like if we think about like daddy government or like mama pharma, she's gonna take care of us. All these archetypal systems as like parents, as like the supposed to be like the authoritative figures that keep our society as if we're children,
Yeah.
well behaved, well nurtured, etc. So it's almost as if, imagine us, the collective us, we're growing up, we're, in our late stage adulthood, or sorry, we're like in our young adult stage, and then our parents get sick. And that's kind of what happened in 2020. Like the system grew ill, and we
Yeah.
had to figure out, all right, well, now we got to take care of ourselves because, mom and dad aren't going to be there. So, it's time to, contact your local farmers and do this and do that,
Yeah.
make your own products. Got to give a shout out to Michelle Lundquist and Mario Garza. Michelle sent me some deodorant, soap, shampoo. I got some lip balm. And there's a lot of benefit to what you said earlier. Like it's empowering to know like
Hmm.
I can pronounce every ingredient. I'm not questioning anything.
Yep.
I feel secure in like the investment. And we think about things that you use every day. The next thing I gotta get, I've got like fluoride free toothpaste, but like I know I could do better. I could probably make my own. I could talk to Michelle about that. But it's so nice to take that power back. I think that's a really empowering approach to life in general, not only to collaborate with people who, have their expertise and their passion in your local area or in your sphere, your network, but being able to do it yourself, I think is a great lesson. So if we do look at this archetypally as like we've lost the parental figures that we've always relied on and all the boomers have relied on and this and that, then I feel like we've grown up a lot and maybe
Hmm.
that's for the best. Although I wouldn't wish these 2020s on anyone from any other planet or timeline, but I guess there is always some silver lining, isn't there, El?
Well, there is in that growth of we're all still going to have aches or pains, or maybe
Mhm.
we cut ourselves, or we have a sore throat, or whatever those things are. We still need solutions for them. And I was like, I really don't want to go to the doctor unless I really need to. Um, and so there's been times, after I left pharma that I had to be like, all right, I'm going to swallow my pride because like I had an ovarian cyst rupture and I was bleeding internally. Okay. No oils or herbs was going to fix that.
Mhm.
Like that was surgery. Okay. I tried to hold off, stubborn, not stupid. Um, but I've learned a lot of things now, and I've really dug into how can I be healthier? How can I make my family healthier? And taking those degrees that I thought were worthless, right? And taking that knowledge and going, okay, I'm not going to use it in the way I thought I did,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean all the information is shit.
Right. It's not the baby in the bathwater scenario. You're learning how to
Right.
integrate it. Yeah.
So one of the things I do now is holistic coaching. I can't give medical recommendations. I am not a doctor, um, but I can give you advice should you choose to take it of, hey, I have this symptom. Is there something that I could take to help with that? Because it is my opinion that Western medicine gives band-aids for everything.
Mhm.
They don't actually get to the root cause. If you're
Temporary
constantly
solution.
having, right, because they just want to create constant customers.
Mhm.
I want you to come to me with a problem.
And never come
We
back.
work on it, and then I never see you again
Yep.
unless it's for something new.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right? Like I don't want repeat customers. I
Yeah.
like
The way
referrals
it
are
should be.
great, right? Like if you have
Mhm.
something new that pops up, like totally cool with that. But I don't want to create repeat customers. If I create repeat customers, then I am not doing what I need to be doing.
Mhm.
Now, is that to say that everything is a quick fix? Absolutely not. A lot of times, if you're having trouble with something, it's taken you years to get to that point, and it's going to take you a while to get back to homeostasis, to get you to that healthy point.
Mhm.
And it's going to take work. It's not as easy as popping a pill in the morning. It might be a complete diet overhaul. It might be cutting out foods. It might be adding in foods that you're like, I swore that I would never take beef liver because I think it's gross, but all right, if I have to take capsules, like I can't do it frozen, like whatever, right? But if you're open to trying new things, like my husband's learning this lesson, and it's been a slow process. Um, he's like, all right, like there's clearly benefit. Same thing with my dad. My dad, love him to death. He gets like leg cramps at night.
Mhm.
And I was like, how about you try some of this magnesium lotion?
Right.
That's not going to work. That's not going to do anything. And he did it the first night. And he's like, oh, that's just a coincidence. That's just a coincidence.
It's a
And I'm like, all
placebo
right,
again.
I didn't work that hard that day. All right, all right. After like 3 nights, he's like, all right, maybe there's something to this. And
Mhm.
now, he puts it on every night. Um, and for some people, like me, right? I wouldn't try essential oils until I wasn't sleeping through the night, coughing like crazy. Sometimes it takes a really big event
Yeah.
where Western medicine's not giving you answers for you to go, okay, I'll try anything.
Mhm.
I hope people come to me before that because those moments really suck, but I still want to help you in those too.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a perfect way to describe like how holistic health should. It doesn't always have to integrate Western medicine, but there's a really beautiful way that they can merge together. Because that's the way, like, if we're thinking about a car, right? And like a car needs to get an oil change, it's just inevitable.
Right.
It's gotta
Right.
happen.
Right.
That's how I think of like Western medicine. Like things have to function properly. If they break, you got to bring it to the mechanic. But like in the meantime, there's other things you can do to like tune up your vehicle in special ways and
Right.
support it in special ways. You could even drive a certain way, and that's where lifestyle comes in. That will do less wear and tear on your vehicle. And I think that
Yeah.
um, metaphor is a great segue to this next thing I want to ask you about, because when we think about cars, we're thinking about traveling, and we also think about speed bumps, right? So
Yep. Yep.
if we're gonna look ahead at 2023 and about potential goals, and even people who you've planned to speak to on your podcast, there's always going to be speed bumps, right? It's like we cannot
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
avoid that. um so that being said, what is it that you're really really looking forward to? Where do you feel the most inspired, and like kind of what you were alluding to earlier in terms of like research, like what are you really itching to like dig into some more in this next year?
All right. So my goals for 2023 are to have my own physical location where I can see clients and have a system set up where you can get trusted supplements. So you're not going on Amazon wondering, is this supplement good? Is this brand good? There's 50,000 types of magnesium. Which type do I need?
Mhm.
Um, so that's one of my goals for 2023. And then I guess research, it's more of what people need. Like, how can I help people? I went into science to
Good
help people
answer.
and I left science to help people. My passion has never changed, just the way I'm going about it has.
Mhm.
I still I want people to live the healthiest life. I know what it's like to be in chronic pain. I know what it's like to go to the doctor all the time and just want answers. And not that I can claim to have all the answers, but maybe I can give you a little puzzle piece. Maybe I can give you a little bit of something. Maybe I can make things just a little bit easier. Like, that's all I want to do.
Absolutely. That's such a beautiful answer, Elle. I mean, that really, I mean, I could feel that your goals have not changed. They're the same goals, right? Even in the beginning when you joined
Yep.
pharma,
Yep.
you're still the same individual trying to help the collective as much as you can. And I appreciate you for that. And
Thank you.
I'm excited for 2023. I feel like, you've got a lot of momentum behind you, and I'm really proud of what you've been able to produce. And going back to the doorway to the divine, the moment you first stepped out into public and shared your gifts, your talents with us, I think you've made the world a better place. So I hope you keep that doorway open. Looking forward to what's coming next for you. And yeah, thanks for sharing your divine gifts. And I feel like we'll definitely chat again soon and continue right where we left off.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me on. And I'm glad we got to make this work just a little bit earlier. And it was great chatting with you again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Likewise, Al. And, one last time, what's your podcast called, and anything else you want to leave our beautiful, wonderful audience with?
Yes, Speedbumps Podcast, all major platforms. On Instagram, I'm one thumb L, ONE thumb EL, or speed.bumps.podcast on Instagram. If you want to chat, if you heard something interesting that you want to talk about, or you want to come on the show, please reach out. I love chatting with people. Or even if you're like, hey, what you just talked about, this holistic counseling thing, like tell me more about that, or you're interested. We don't have to be in person, it can be via Zoom. So I'm also open to that.
Lovely, lovely. You are much appreciated, my friend. And I want to say to the audience, much love to everybody, and thank you. I'll see you guys later.